So I just finished the book Demon Copperhead by the same woman that wrote Barbara Kingsolver, the same woman that wrote the Poisonwood Bible, and she's written this book that is supposed to parallel the story of David Copperfield, not to be confused with the magician. It's a Dickensian whatever. So I don't know, it hit me pretty heavy, and I kind of wanted to just talk about it. Anyway, so Demon Copperhead is a young boy, 10 years old, in the Appalachian region, and a huge premise of this story is the attack on the quote-unquote hillbilly culture that people seem to stigmatize, as well as just being a product of foster care. Is born of a teenage addict mother. His father died when he was still in her womb, and then she smokes cigarettes on her front porch with her 10-year-old son and talks about her love life, and they just have this very surreal relationship. She ends up dating a guy named, I can't remember, I'm going to call him Smokeable. So she's dating this guy Smokeable, and he's very similar to a stepfather that I had growing up, that just wants the mom and wants the kid out of the picture, so he kind of attacks the kid at any given chance he gets. It's very contentious. Gets the mother to marry him when the boy is out of the home on a visit with the neighbors, who are basically a second family to him. Their youngest is the same age. His name is Maggot. I don't know. They're the ones that come and check when things are not going well. And they're the ones that gave him the first warning that this man in his mother's life is bad news, when he was just a little boy with daddy eyes, kind of seeing it as a cool guy. The mother dies shortly after this, and she overdoses because she has a relapse, and he's put in the foster care system, and he kind of bounces around from home to home. And his first one, he's basically an indentured servant or a slave, where he's made to work on the tobacco farms of this man named Old Creaky, or whatever he calls him. And there's a cult of personality character called Fast Forward, who is the oldest foster child in this home and is beloved by all. It's astounding to young Demon, who feels unwanted and unloved by everyone, to the point where the family next door wouldn't take him in when he had nowhere else to go, even though they had been his secondary grandparents and such. So he's in this situation until the work dries up, essentially, and he is kicked out of that home and sent to a new home with these very, they kind of remind me a lot of, in Les Miserables, the Thénardier family, where they're just these curmudgeons that they don't manage their money well. They're always scheming. They're always trying to find a way to save a dollar, pawn stuff, and they end up starving him because they charge him for food, and he's only 10, maybe 11 at this point, and can't work. And he's just going through this year of starvation. He has no clothes. He's just unlovable by all of his peers at school. They pick on him and make fun of him. And there's this really surprising viciousness. I remember growing up in school, and there were kids that had lost a parent, and everybody, that kind of immediately shut down any opportunity to pick on that child, to make fun of that child. Anything that you could see wrong with that kid was automatically just set aside once you realized that they were parentless, motherless, or fatherless. it was, I don't know, maybe that was just me. I'm sure kids are evil. I'm sure kids are cruel. But in this story, it's astounding to me how ruthlessly malicious these children are towards him. He's bullied everywhere. They send, the family that he lives with sends him to work, again, as essentially a slave, because all of his funds go back into the family to pay for his food, which isn't a lot of food. And he's going through garbage, just kind of separating garbage for this guy who's willing to hire these kids. That family runs out of their last options for funds. He's been he's been hiding his income to save up for what comes next, because he knows something's going to come next. So they go to Ohio. He goes back to his case manager, and they're trying to figure out what to do with him, and he can't go back with that other family that helped raise him. So he's just like, screw it. I know I have a dad out there somewhere that he's dead, but that man has a family. I'm going to find my grandmother. So he goes and hitchhikes as an 11-year-old with a couple $100s in his pocket, and he immediately gets his money robbed from him from a crackhead that's trying to convince him to sleep with her in order for her to get a high off of his income. And it's this really pivotal scene where he just is like, everything sucks. All these adults in my life, every single adult in my life is a failure. They rejected me. And he just is at his wit's end. He doesn't stop though, and that's like an important, almost like a prophecy in the story, foreshadowing, that he just, no matter what happens, he never stops. He keeps going forward, and ends up in the town that he knows his grandmother is in. And so he's asking around, trying to be like, hey, where's this grandma of mine? And the people are making fun of her, and, you know, they call her the old man-eater, the witch lady. And he's like, well, shit, that's kind of scary. But he goes and finds her anyway, and she is exactly that. She's a very, very strong feminist, anti-male in every respect. Any man who stands up to P. And there's this, I can't remember the relation to him. I think it's like a cousin or an uncle or something. But there's a man who's wheelchair bound in the house of the grandmother, who clothes him, feeds him, takes care of him until she can find out what to do with him, because she can't have a boy in her home. She takes care of young women. So there's a wheelchair bound man who, you know, conveniently can't stand up to P, so I guess he's safe. And he kind of opens up the boy's mind to the written art of things, like just the concept of beauty in words. And I should also mention that when he was at Old Creaky's farm, he started to develop the ability to draw. That was one of his escapes, was to draw these superhero graphic novel-esque characters. And fast forward, saw his ability and called him Diamond instead of Demon. And that was, this sounds beautiful, but it was actually kind of like what pimps do, where they rename their product. They take your name from you. It's also a thing seen in cults a lot, where people will just kind of take your identity and act like it's a gift to you. So that happens, and he's developing the ability to draw. He gets to, he ends up rehomed with a coach at his original school. Well, not his original school, but the high school that he'd be, or the junior high he would have gone into had things not gone the way they had gone. And it's important to note that this man has absolutely no relation to him whatsoever. The way that his grandmother knows this coach is because the coach married one of the young women that his grandmother had taken in. And he has a daughter named Angus. I think her name originally was Agnes, but she liked Angus more. I don't know. Anyway, he is, for the first time, being permitted to wear nice clothes and eat anything he wants whenever he wants. And it's just this, he has he transitions better than I did when I was in a nice neighborhood from being from a rough neighborhood. He adapts and again moves forward. For me, it was like a ego death to be around these weak, soft people that had nothing to worry about, no reason to complain, but still found ways to complain. I hated them. He doesn't hate anyone, even the ones that harm him. He gets angry at them, but he doesn't like hold resentment in his heart. He just kind of continues on forward. So he ends up with junior varsity, gets into football. He has a drive for the sport, and he has no long-term goals or ideologies. He's just like, I'm doing good for now. And then he gets injured, and the doctor prescribes opiates. So it's also important to mention that a sister or a daughter of the family that used to look out for him, that used to watch out for him, she is now a nurse in the town. She moved back into town once her daughter was able to be adopted to her, because she kind of took in the little girl when her mother was acting up. I'm getting outside of my way, but these people are important. Emmy is the daughter's name. June, I think, is the mother's name. And she's one of the first people to say, hey, don't take these drugs. These drugs are going to kill you. And he takes the drugs anyway, because he's like, well, is it oxy? Because that's what killed my mom. And they're like, no, it's not oxy. And he's like, oh, good, I'm fine then. I'll just take this. And he ends up with, a crippling opiate addiction. He finds the love of his life. And, he's only 15 at this time. He finds this love of his life girl who's been taking care of her ailing father and also taking his medicine, his pain medication. They end up in a whirlwind relationship where the father dies. He's living in this house with this girl who's completely riddled with drugs. Demon's working, but the girl is just not. She's heavy in the addiction, and she eventually dies. He continues onward yet again, and this is around the time that he drops out of high school. Now, he had this art teacher who was married to, if I'm not mistaken, the history teacher in his school, and the history teacher was black. That's an important mention, because that's not something you see a lot in this time, and it's in the 90s, so it's not that long ago, but it was still, you got to think, like West Virginia, they still are kind of in the 1940s today in a lot of ways. So back then, even more so. And there was a lot of discussion about the rebel flag, and the history teacher kind of brought up an interesting point I never thought about before. This black history teacher, he sees the rebel flag, and people are trying to say things like, oh, it's my heritage, it's just about history, it's not about racism. And he's like, it's not about any of that, actually. It's odd that two sides went to war, and both of their flags are being presented after the war is finished. It's a strange thing. And then he relates it to sports. He's like, it would be like if your high school team and this other high school team were to go to match on the field, and everybody started using both flags on their cars and all of that. Like, it's not normal to have two opposing sides of the Civil War be displayed in the same place. It should only be one or the other. I thought that was it, That's a good answer. And that's a good emotionless answer to the question of it, because I know a lot of people that have the rebel flag. I live in Alabama now. This is new to me. But I lived in South Carolina before that, and it is everywhere, you see it a lot. And initially I would see it and think, oh, I know what you are. I'm not going to have a good conversation with you. And of course, like, the more you work with people, you can't not talk to someone. You get to know them, you find out there are actually a lot of good qualities in a person, even if you don't agree with that part of them. And kind of made me think, like, yeah, if you look at one person because of their flag or because of their race, and you decide that they're not worth talking to, it kind of stems from the same origins of mistrust and ignorance of that person. Anyway, so he, back to Demon, gets off of the opiates after, there's this June's daughter, Emmy, who was essentially like a childhood sweetheart, childhood friend before any of this happened, but, severely removed from his life because of his chaotic existence. She ends up dating Fast Forward, and Fast Forward has a pimp-like methodology to make a person, a woman especially, feel worthless without him. So make them feel like they're a bad person. And Demon catches this. He's like, it's strange that I heard Emmy talk about how much she's a bad person and not worth anything good. He's like, that's the same thing I heard this other girl that dated him say. He's like, the more he takes notice of this godlike person that he adored when he was in the foster care system, the more he starts to see that there's something sinister there. And Fast Forward has taken Emmy and pimped her out in Atlanta. The mother hasn't been able to find her daughter, and there's been no contact. They go down and get Emmy after, a whole lot of other stuff happens. And upon his return, he finds that his girlfriend at the time, his hopeful wife, is miscarried, and that she just doesn't even remember having a pregnancy. It's gotten to that point of the opioid crisis for her. So Emmy is sent off to a very expensive rehab where she's going to be there for ages. And then it should also be mentioned that she was dating and proposed to be married to a guy named Hammer, who was a very sweet, wholesome boy who always put everybody before himself, to the point where people made fun of him for being so sweet and kind and good. And she cheated on him with Fast Forward and ended up with Fast Forward, leaving him for Fast Forward, which is part of her self-hatred that led to her being able to be manipulated so heavily. So he goes out, Demon goes out, and he's still in the middle of his drug addiction. He's doing some comic strips for his friend, who he also knew from Old Creakies, and who works in the newspaper, and he's kind of like advancing in the world a little bit, and people are recognizing his talent, but he's also like just a drug addict right now. That's all that is in his mind for the most part. Everything else is just kind of superfluous. Anyway, so then at this point there's 2 deaths, and it's kind of his rock bottom, as it were. He goes to the place where his father died, and it was arranged by this girl Rose, who was Fast Forward's, kind of underkicked dog of a girlfriend, not girlfriend, whatever. He says the cruelest things to her, mistreats her this entire story, and she never stops serving him, taking care of him. So she tells Demon, hey, Fast Forward's over in this cove, this Devil's Bath, whatever area that, he wants to see you. And he's just never wanted to go there, never wanted to see it, because that's where his father drowned. And he doesn't even know the full story about how his father died at this point. He just knows it's there is where it happened. So he's always avoided it. And he goes there with Hammer and Maggot. And Maggot is a gay boy with gothic tendencies in West Virginia, where nobody understands him. His mother's in prison for defending herself from an abusive boyfriend. He's just a lost kid. He's heavy on the methamphetamines and all of that. And I don't know. Anyway, so they go to this place, and everything comes to a head where Hammers realizes that Fast Forward is there. He knows who Fast Forward is. He knows what Fast Forward did to Emmy, and that was his long-lasting love. Like, there was never going to be anyone that replaced her. He had started doing drugs as a result of what happened. And everything comes to a head, and they both drown. Fast forward, and Hammer both die. And Demon is in the water trying to get to their bodies and pull their bodies out. And it's like this like heart-wrenching moment where he's so detached from so many bad things that happen. But the way he talks about Hammer, it really got me. And it's odd because there's so many things that should be a moment of a glimpse into the heart of a hurt child, but nothing really, Barbara doesn't delve into that throughout this entire story. There's no pity, there's no self-pity, no sorry, no I hate everything, none of that. He's just, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and oh, this sucked too. Until we get to this part with Hammer, where he just starts talking about everything, life, and the horrors of it, and how horrible everything is, and how it's just heart-wrenching, because Hammer isn't even a prevalent character in the story. He's just an offside commentator. He's an NPC. So he's in the hospital, and Emmy's mother, June, comes to see him and is just like, it's time for you to go. Maggot is going to get arrested Rose is going to accuse Maggot of causing this death because he was involved in the drug deal that caused Hammer to be cracked out of his mind and all of that. So because a crime occurred and drugs were involved, the person that dealt the drugs or was involved in the doing of the drugs is the person that's going to get blamed for all of the subsequent damage that is caused by that specific drug incident. So Maggot, he's going to, which is so screwed up because his mother is finally out of prison. She's been in prison for almost 20 years. And she wasn't wrong in what she did, because she was like, her child was being starved by her boyfriend. He tied her up. It was like all this stuff. Like, she had every right to do so much worse. And she's in prison. She finally gets out of prison only for her son to go to prison. It's insane. So he wants to be there for his friend's trial. He wants to be there to bury his friend Hammer. He wants to be involved in all of these things. And June's like, you don't ever get a chance like this. You don't get a chance. First of all, you'll never be able to bury all the ghosts that you need to bury in order to be ready for rehab. You need to leave this town, and you need to leave it for a minimum of a year. It might even need to be longer than that. For you to get away from every opportunity to do drugs, all of the triggers for doing drugs, all of the things that are hurting you, you need to face them, and you need to face them away from here. And it doesn't matter that your friend is dead, and it also doesn't matter that your other friend is going to jail. None of this is important. So she convinces him, and he goes through his steps, and he goes in a halfway house, and he does all of the things. And then he comes back home, and he comes back home to visit his coach, who is a huge reason for why he was on drugs in the first place, because he kind of didn't see this man as a father. He saw him as an employer, because that's the only relationship he really had with any foster parent, was an employer. So he felt obligated to heal from his sports injury where he ripped his knee. So he took the drugs, and he did all of the things that needed to be done in order for him to get back on the field, because he felt like he was going to be displaced if he didn't do this. And a lot of people in the town blame the coach for this, and he doesn't blame him at all. He's like, no, I did those drugs. I did that to myself. And coach did a lot. He's kind of comparing him to these other horrible people in his life, and he's like, he gave me everything. In the middle of all of this, his friend Tommy from Old Creekies, whatever, and the newspaper agency that has helped him cultivate his craft as a comic strip artist, comic graphic novelist, he calls him up out of the blue. Now, Demon has been including or doing a web series of comics about a superhero, redneck, hillbilly person that's just a West Virginia, I don't know, there's no stories for these people, there's no heroes for these people, so he's making one, and he's also making one about, the crackheads he knew, and all of the other characters in his life, and he's gained quite a little cult following in his town. And then Tommy calls him up, and he's just like, I got it. I know what happened to us as a nation, or as a people group, as a culture. I know what happened to us, and I know what you need to do next. So he's saying, this hillbilly shit has happened from the dawn of time. I know when it started, and you need to write a history book about this, a graphic novel displaying the war that we've been fighting with the rest of this country from the initial creation of our people group. And essentially what he's saying is it started with the trade unions or something like that. I'm a failure here because I can't entirely remember, but essentially what it was the whiskey tax. That's what it was. George Washington started taxing whiskey, and this group of people in the Appalachian Mountains were like, well, we aren't even producing this for profit. Most of what we make is for each other and for our families and stuff like that. You're going to tax something that I could buy the corn, I could buy the sugar, I could pay sales tax on that, and what I make with it, you shouldn't be able to tax. That'd be like if you made, cornbread. And then they were like, well, we're going to do a tax on cornbread. So that's how they saw it. And then when they didn't back down and the government came in, the infantry, whatever, came in, they were like, well, buddy, we got guns too. So it became a standoff, and the way the nation responded to this was to vilify and create a character of stupidity out of these people, to make fun of them and to nickname them hillbillies and to try to discredit them as rational human beings. And Demon describes it best. He says, it's like when all of the popular kids are in the bathroom and they're talking shit about this one kid and they're just making fun of him, and they're all laughing, and it's not even meant to be mean. They're just laughing about it. It's just funny, and you're there and you don't stop it. You don't participate, but you don't stop it either. And then he says, then the stall opens up and the kid that they were laughing at comes out, and he heard every word. And then he said, we're that kid in the stall, us people of the West Virginian Appalachian area. We're in the stall. We can hear you. And we can hear you now, especially with the internet. And we're not laughing. And there's this other thing there's a teacher that relates the word hillbilly with the N-word, but not in the way you think. So he's not saying it's as bad as or anything like that. He's saying it's a word that was used against us, that we take back, and that if anyone else uses it towards us, they're ignorant of us. It's a symbol of ignorance for them to use it on us. But for us to use it, it's a term of endearment, and it's also a point of pride. So take that how you will. I don't entirely have all that much of an opinion about it, because I've always said that for the same reason that women can use the B word and it can be fun and have 5 million meanings, but if a man uses it, it only has one meaning ever. It's the same thing. If you're in the group, there's a different connotation to any phrase you use. Gay men can use the agate word, things like that. That's how I see it. If you're not in the group, mind your business. But he related it to that. And so the ending of the story, he's got a cause that he's striving towards, which is to represent his hometown and to just kind of point out all the flaws. You know, he can't change the child welfare system. He can't change DSS. He can't change the opioid crisis. He can't do any of these things. But this one thing that his own people don't know about, he can make that known. So that's his cause. And then at the end of the story, he kind of has a driving off in the sunset moment with Angus, where she's always been there. He's always been so comfortable with her. You know, they fart in front of each other, all of that. And he never saw her as anything other than a sister. And then at the end of the story, he comes to find out that she's always had a thing for him. And they drive to the ocean, which is somewhere he's always wanted to go, because he was born inside the I want to say fallopian sac. That's probably not correct, but it's called a mermaid birth when the child's born inside of the liquid thing that's supposed to pop, and the woman's supposed to like look like she peed herself. I'm gonna call it the water balloon. So he was born inside the water balloon, and it was said by Mrs. Pidgeot, I can't remember her name, that children that were born that way don't have to ever fear drowning. And that was another thing he said about the drowning of Hammer. He was like, I should have been the one to go in, because Hammer went in to save Fast Forward even though he hated him. He was like, I should have been the one to go, and I'm the only one here that wouldn't have died. So he believed that till his dying day, and he always wanted to see the ocean. He never got to see it. And so at the end of the story, he goes to see the one big thing that he knows can never hurt him. And it's a beautiful allegory, I believe, for his relationship with Angus, because she's also never hurt him. She's the only person in his entire life who has never hurt him. So, I don't know. It really made me think there's something powerful about the people of that region. The Foxfire books, the old witchy tales, the old wives' tales, the turpentine as a remedy for literally everything. And it's like a group of people that have been displaced, but there's no difference that I can think of for who they are that would have allowed us to maintain a prejudice against them. There's no like racial difference. There's no, I guess that's the main thing. There's no racial or cultural difference. They speak the same English as us. They have the same skin color as everybody that was here at that time. You know, so they couldn't say, oh, let's go kill them, they're black. You know, that it was like they had to attack their character. And they used a lot of the same descriptors that they used on the African-American black people of the time, where they're lazy, they're always out to steal, they don't pay their taxes, they don't do their jobs, they refuse to work. Everything that they invent or create or develop is automatically, inferior to everything else, kind of like where we get the word monkey wrench from. There was no monkey involved in the creation of that wrench. But it's like that. It's a book that's going to stick with me. I just wanted to share that. I don't know. I think I'm going to do these for a while. Just drive home, look like crap, and talk about a book I read. So, if you guys like anything about Barbara Kingsolver, or you have a book to recommend about it, let me know, I guess. And, yeah. Alright.